Hi, my name is Tom Gales, and this is video number 3 in our series of videos about what happened in American public school education. And I'd like to introduce my friend Connie Zimmermann, and she is my partner in making these videos, the brains of the outfit actually. But we're going to do this in a more relaxed, general, just question and answer session.
Hi, I am not an educator, but I am the recipient of a failed New Orleans public school education in the 1960s and the 1970s. So here we go with our questions. So Tom, would you share with everyone your background in education?
Okay, yeah, I had a bachelor's degree in education and a master's degree in school administration. And I was in education for 16 years. I taught 4 years, and I was an administrator for the 12 of those years, and the last 4 years was in a Catholic school.
Well, what made you leave education?
Well, I really wanted to start a private school. And the only way I could do it was to get into the oil business, I thought, make enough money. And I only lasted 1 year in the oil business before I missed education so much. I took a position for 4 years in the Catholic school. And then I went back to in the oil business again. But the whole idea was I wanted to get out and start a private school, make enough money to, and it never did materialize. I never pulled it off, but I still think that was the proper thing to do. Well, at the time, I kind of see the direction education was going. They were getting bigger schools, bigger school districts. The superintendents and were not really listening to what we needed in the schools. And I really wanted to get out and start a private school.
Well, how big were the schools when?
Well, my school was really pretty small. I didn't know that when I first went in. I just started teaching. I took a job at teaching. I turned out it was a great little town, great parents. School board was great, and it was probably 200 to 300 children. I'm not even sure exactly how many. The class size, I started with a split 5th and 6th grade class, and I think I had 24 or 26 students. And it was a self-contained classroom, meaning they only had one teacher that taught all the subjects. So we prepared approximately 6 subjects for each grade. But it was a good situation actually, because of the students, when I wasn't teaching that particular grade, the others learned to study on their own.
When did we move from one-room schoolhouses to larger schools?
Well, it happened over a number of years, I suspect. But I remember when my family moved from the middle of Kansas to the southwest part of Kansas, it was a lot less sparsely populated. And I know the year 1946 was the first year that the people in the little community I lived in actually started attending a multi-room school. If I would have came one more year, I would have been educated in a one-room school house.
So this was probably the end of the 40s into the 50s?
Yeah, probably in the 40s, middle of the 40s and the 50s. It probably pretty much ended.
Okay. So in the schools that you were associated with, was there a principal, a school board? What was the structure?
Yeah, I began in a small community school. And we had a local school board. They were parents of the children in the schools.
Oh, wow.
And they actually interviewed the teachers, and I signed a contract with a school board member. Hadn't even seen the principal yet. But yeah, every school, in each school I was at, each school had a principal, except when I first became an administrator and I had 2 really little schools. I spent a day at each school.
All right, this question is about books. Where did the schools buy the books, and who decided on what books were going to be used?
Okay. Yeah, they were ordered from the regular textbook companies, Houghton Mifflin, Laidlaw, Macmillan. All those textbook companies were up and running here back then. And we usually had a textbook committee, and generally the textbook committees were made up of generally the principal and maybe a teacher or 2, and generally a parent, and sometimes a school board member.
Really?
Yeah. And they reviewed books or talked about, those reviewed the weaknesses of maybe the old textbook. Textbooks were used until they couldn't hardly be used anymore, or until historically too many events happened that needed to be taught.
Oh.
Because some of these books, they were 15 or 20 years old. Seriously.
So in those smaller schools and in the past, how were the kids tested? How did you know if a student was ready to move on to the next grade?
The way we use tests, then we have something called the Iowa Basic Skills Test. And it broke the subjects down, like, for example, math would be multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, and maybe some other subject or two, or topic or two. But they did that in every subject. English would be broken down in 4 or 5 different areas. And that test was normally given at the first of the year. And sometimes it's also given the second or the end of the year to see how well they progress. Or sometimes they give it the first of the year and then they give it again until the next year, when those kids moved on to another grade. Well, it's used in 2 different ways. I think the proper way to use it was not to use it to show advance or to advance a child. It shouldn't be used for pass-fail. Never did believe in that. And I didn't use it that way. The way the kids passed or failed based on, we usually gave 9 weeks test. So that was 4 9 weeks tests, including that end of the year test. And each one of those tests counted quite a bit. But you also counted the everyday, daily grades. And that was all averaged. And that's what really, we left it up to the teacher to decide that. If it was a good teacher, they knew whether the child deserved to pass or not pass. The way to use the standardized test or the Iowa Basic Skills test, there's 2 or 3 ways to look at it. For one thing, when you looked at, they gave you a printout for each student, but they also gave you a printout of the average for the whole class. That's the first thing I looked at. How are they doing in each one of these subjects and in each subject area? Were they weak, for example, in multiplication? And you look at that and say, wait a minute. The whole class was low in multiplication. Something's wrong. What can we do? And you didn't automatically jump on a teacher. You looked at the book and you said, is the book strong enough? And if it wasn't, you supplemented the book.
Oh.
But that usually, if it's the same textbook, and if the principal before me was doing their job and the teachers, they would have noticed that before.
Mm.
So that textbook, and that's another reason maybe change textbooks sometimes. But generally we didn't have enough money to just all of a sudden change textbooks, so we supplemented it. But that was one thing to look at. But the other thing is, you had to look at the teacher and say, did they spend enough time on this particular subject? And sometimes they didn't. And you could, next year they probably would. Mm-hmm. But it also helped in the next year you knew that student was weak, or that class. Sometimes it's a whole class of kids that just had a hard time. But you knew you just going to have to take more time, spending more time with them. But that's how those are used. I don't believe you should ever use them for pass-fail, because some kids just have a rough time with standardized tests.
I agree. That's interesting. That's completely different than high-stakes testing today, where the child can fail the entire year in one test.
That's asinine. I just don't think that's right. It's not fair to kids. It's not fair to teachers either. Because sometimes you get a class, we had whole classes of kids, good kids, but they're just not great as the class before them, or the kids after them. They just have, and that's happened. You ask any teacher, and if they've been in education any length of time, you ran into that. Doesn't mean you don't love the kids any less. It's just they just have a harder time as a class.
Okay. So Tom, I've read about an association about dyslexia and our schools not teaching comprehensive phonics anymore. In your experience, did you teach phonics, and did you see dyslexia?
Didn't see dyslexia in our schools. As a matter of fact, I can't remember in all those years that we had a student that couldn't read. And I think I can't attest to that it really helped dyslexia, but I can see that it might have a relationship, because when you teach phonics, it's very orderly. And people are taught things in a very orderly fashion. And they learn it a little bit at a time, and they learn how words are put together, how to sound out words, or how to use all the vowel sounds, long and short vowel sounds. And we taught it for 4 years in almost every school I was in. They taught it up to 3rd to 4th grade.
Wow.
And I think it probably has something to do with it. I mean, I could see where it might.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for watching.
And remember, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be.